How about students who keep talking when you want to start?
We're all jacked up on ice cream.
Yeah, I know, that was a mistake.
You know, one of my favourite ones with kids, if you're going to hear me, clap your hands once. If you're going to hear me, clap your hands twice. If you can hear me, clap your hands 3 times. 3 claps gets any number of people ready.
Okay, well, ice cream was a big mistake, wasn't it? Everyone looks well fed and a bit sleepy and happy to talk. This will be a fairly short session because you'll want to finish by 8 exactly on time. So what we're talking about tonight is what people used to say were difficult students, and we reword that as students who challenge us. So let's hear from some of the experienced teachers. What have been behaviours that have challenged you? Let's have a think. What is it? It's probably fewer than we imagine, but very memorable. It's not many ever. Most people are intrinsically cooperative, helpful and delightful, and you can trust that. An occasional one arrives with a record sometimes of being a difficult behaviours that they continue to play out. So what are some things that you've known in your teaching?
The expert who wants to take over the floor.
Yes, so can you give us an example of that?
I was teaching and I can't remember exactly what I was teaching, but I had an engineer in the group who decided that whatever I was saying was completely wrong and that he had all the facts and figures and just kept challenging me all the way through. So, yeah.
So, well, Ollie's having a massage. We can't interrupt him. But I thought we could just write down there, the expert. Yeah? You're a bit tired tonight. Would you like to have a rest? Would someone like to write who's feeling high on ice cream? Thanks, Pat. That'd be really good.
Oh, it's a whiteboard. Sorry, I thought it was a piece of paper. Clearly, I'm tired.
This is a bit of
Take me
storming.
away.
Right, so we've got the expert. Someone else?
Someone who keeps talking
Yeah.
for longer than you said.
The talker who goes on and on.
The class clown.
Oh, look, you're absolutely right. If someone sits in a corner and makes everyone laugh every 30 seconds and you can't follow and share the joke, and no one else can share the joke, but little roars of laughter go up from this group all the time, it's really pretty difficult. Okay, so who else?
Side conversations is very similar to that.
What's that?
Side conversations.
Yes, they can be.
Just sotto voce. Not ever loud enough for everybody to hear clearly, but enough to blur the sound so no one can hear, even the speaker.
So the conversation.
People that want to make the content all about themselves and their feedback.
Yes.
Does that fall within the expert or does it have its own category?
Yeah, how could we name that? The person you ask for something and they say, I've done this, I've had this experience. How could we name it?
Sorry, maybe a slightly different take. I was going to call them the client because what I've seen is some folks are using the class to get their design done. They're linking everything back to each other.
Oh, I know, yes. Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, so give an example quite clearly.
Oh, in my property I have this.
That's
what
right.
do you think I should do?
Exactly, yep. So that's the my situation person. And it's paramount. My soils are like this, my water's like this, my experience is like this. Yeah, exactly. Other experience?
I've got an odd one. In a yoga class that I was involved in teaching years ago, there was one student, she was actually a school teacher, and sometimes during a class people might do a varied pose due to an injury or whatever. She would decide to do a completely different pose to what you'd instructed, but it was very spiteful.
Ah.
It was someone who does something completely against what they've been instructed to challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Good. The challenger. Yeah. Yeah. The challenger. They're not exactly wearing boxing gloves, but it's there, isn't it? The challenger's quite strong often. Someone else? Another example.
The person with the agenda, which is sort of similar to an expert, but often it's slightly different. So they could have specific views on vaccinations.
Sociopathy or...
And they'd like everyone to know about it.
Yeah, right. So we have the missionary.
Okay,
Yeah, and the missionary actually exists. People say, "Can I pray?" And I say, "Well, before or after the class, and anyone who wants to can go." But the missionary about anything, about my place, my country, my something. Yeah, it doesn't matter. We don't ever comment on spelling or punctuation because too many people have had that in their lives to worry about. We don't care.
Not even when it's correct.
Yeah, when it's correct. Right. Who else has got an example?
The person who asks lots and lots of questions all the time.
Yes.
So the thing gets off track because the group discusses.
Right. So the interrogator.
The interrogator.
Right. We're getting the language right now, aren't we, I think?
Yeah.
It's getting close to torture.
We didn't finish the affirmer, or what would you call that? The person who's looking for constant
Validation.
Oh, that was the client.
I don't know whether it was exactly the same with the client.
The I one. This is it.
Reassuring.
No, it's...
Interrogator.
We'll write the interrogator down anyway. Yes, really one thing is don't ever correct spelling or punctuation. Some people freeze and they got smacked on the knuckles for it when they were young, so we're really not interested. Okay, did we get a name for that other person? Have we got one?
The I. The I.
The I. Or how about me? It's about me. All about me.
There's sometimes someone who very clearly wants to show you that they're not listening and don't want to listen to you.
Oh, yeah.
And they make a really good scene about sitting like this, or they're on their phone.
That's the challenger too, I think.
So we have someone who does something different, someone who verbally challenges you, and then someone who behaviourally blocks you. Yeah.
So some of this is just a test, isn't it, to see how you behave, because they have found these behaviours get attention. And even negative attention's better than no attention. So, and also maybe it's their pattern of behaviour they've done for years and years and years, and they just continue it into these classes. Would anyone like to add one more or two more? Something else that comes to mind?
Perfectionist.
Well, to some extent, yes. I think we can add that. Thank you. There are people who are sort of, yes, but it's not good enough, or why don't you know that absolute detail or something? The
late comer.
Oh, yes, well, that's another one.
The unengaged, is it? The disengaged, that's the one.
Yes,
The
now,
disengaged person. Disengaged.
that's a very interesting one. Right, are there any more?
I keep thinking about Year 6 students towards the end of this year, when they end up having a group of them that have got their own thing going on. But that happens in other groups as well, like when there's a group within a group and they're more interested in their own energy. One PTT I went to, actually, there was a group that were drinking a lot, and they just kind of woke up every day, had their little scene going on, and I was just like, this is really...
I've never had that.
Yeah.
Have you?
We had in South Africa a group of people who smoked, and at every opportunity they would leave the class together and go smoke. Even during micro-teaching, there would be students in the micro-teaching class sitting smoking, and that was like the posse. They would be always late, and they were the first to leave, and it was a little bit of a club.
So the question is for us, these behaviours challenge us. And do we have a toolbox? Do we have a way to deal with things? I'll show you one that happened to me in France. There was a young chap there, and from the beginning to the end, he stood and would not sit and would not participate like this, from beginning to end. So what would you do? Oh, poor Jeff. He just stood there. What would be your approach once you realised it's happening consistently? Beg pardon?
Acceptance of that behaviour if it's not detrimental.
Never draw the class attention to it, never make anyone sensational, never make anyone the subject of the class, whatever the behaviour. Does anyone have some sort of idea how they might deal with it?
Might get a group activity going and then go and invite.
So he was in a design group, but he still still worked from the corner.
He was a prop in a role play.
Yeah.
We have a tree.
Right.
Quietly check in on your side. That
That's right.
else,
Yes.
Maybe
Yeah.
you couldn't physically sit.
Exactly. Pierre, are you comfortable there? Yes. Pierre, do you want to be included? Not really. Pierre, are you learning? Are you doing the work? Yes, he was. And at the end, he stood up and presented. And it was such a shock after 14 days of standing in a corner. He came forward and presented. I never knew what it was about. I'm not a therapist and I wouldn't try. But then the class became comfortable with Pierre standing in the corner for 14 days. And that was fine.
How deep do you go? Do you just invite him and make attempts to include but not engage too much?
You let the class see.
Or do you make a point of going to him after class and saying, is there anything I can actually help you with or do differently to make your time more comfortable?
So let the class see that you've noticed and concerned. So Pierre, would you like to join us? And no messy, no? Okay, fine. And then just go on and take no notice. And then talk to him later and say, are you comfortable in the class? Are you all right? Should I do anything? Do you want the class differently? No. And I don't have to know anything about it, not being a therapist. Another one, and this was interesting, was a chap, I was called in to teach when the teacher went away and the class hadn't been told the teacher was going away. So the teacher was leaving for an overseas job and I thought everyone knew and they didn't. And this student went to the plate glass windows and in the middle of the class just did this. So the class was in a circle and the student was looking out this way. And stayed there. What would you do? This is extreme behaviour, but it's still worth knowing how to what would you do?
Start using the window as a whiteboard.
They're the things that make you relieved. Did the same thing as before, took no notice. And then when we had tea break, I said, will you come and sit by the pond with me and have a cup of tea? And he said, yes. I said, what's the matter? My dad's paid all this money for me to come from Chile to learn how to do this. And now the person's gone away. And I said, oh, it's no problem. You can go up and see Robin Francis, you can go up to Mullaney, I'll make all the calls, you can visit all these eco villages your father wants to do. We can make a fabulous trip for you, it'll be better even than having an interview with this person. Came in, sat down, it was over. But it must never become a class problem. So you wouldn't say to him there, why are you behaving like that? Take it, always there's a rational reason. And don't, Pat?
My friend would approach a situation like that in a very similar way. for quite a different reason, because if you're thrown out of his expectation for the class, and the only way of dealing with it would be to remove himself from the class. So then, and potentially not like that, more like stand in the corner and face the corner, as a like silent protest thing.
Had 3 students in that class that did something. Would you mind standing up for a minute? One came in and he did this. I'm sorry, you need to stand back a bit. And he just did this. And he'd missed 2 sessions. I said, hey, good to see you back, John. It's really nice you're here. You comfortable? And he said, yes. And I said, fine, let's go on. And then gradually he moved the chair, moved himself back, started to participate. So one of the first things is really not let them become a class problem. Similarly, if someone bursts into tears, what would you do? Sometimes they cry because it's all so beautiful, and you think, it's just permaculture, okay.
Depends on the mood in the group.
But you do, okay, let's stay with the principle of not let the group get too involved, but you are aware. If you're working from that, what would you do?
I'd probably just eyeball someone to say, just take a note, or just,
all right.
just make sure of that person, so you don't have to do it.
The first question is, are you okay? And they might say, I always cry when they play Beethoven's Ninth and blah, blah, blah. And I'm a crier. And you say, oh, well, you know, do you need some Kleenex? No, I'm all right, I just cry. You know, so that is one response. But check it out, and the class will copy your behaviour. It's true. It happens like that. I've had a student leave and walk out the door, and you're not aware of what's happened. The door bangs and the student's off the road and it's night time. You don't trust anyone else. You say, someone, will you please make sure everyone gets on with drawing their own water system at home, and I want that done in 5 minutes, and then you go. And you walk as far as they want to walk, and you walk with them, beside them, until they can tell you what they want to, and what they want to do and how they want to do it. But that is then your responsibility for their safety. If someone walks out in a rural area, I wouldn't send anyone else under those conditions. I would take it as my responsibility.
In the case of there being co-teachers or team teachers, would you know, just say that happened right now, would it be okay if Brenna or I went and you stayed? Or under no circumstances would you trust anyone else? If I were lead teacher, I would think that's my responsibility, and I'd say, hey, can you two keep this exercise going? I've been in a place with a car accident, and the whole group wants to run out, and I've said, please stay here, and I've gone across the road, and the whole class has come anyway. And there was another one where the manager was fighting with his best friend who'd come to help him develop the place in Ethiopia. There was a bamboo wall, and they're having a punch-up. And I'm going to get you, and I'm going to get you. And I said, everyone stay there. And I turned around, the whole class was looking in the door. But anyway, they were minor elements that I didn't resolve those. I think the things are more difficult about persistent behaviours. There are the people who want your attention. They always refer to authority. And on the whole, they're people who meet your eye contact, who are looking for approval, who in the break want to come and talk to you, and keep your courtesy above all else. Very courteous and very nice, but be aware, and gradually they'll realise their authority is with the group, and their gradual autonomy is there as well. So that is something you strike quite often. People who only want to talk to the teacher. So you say, talk to the person next to you, and they want to talk to the teacher. So that will gradually reduce as the class comes on, so you answer it courteously and let it go. The person who asks lots of questions, keep answering them. Can you do a question asker? Can you do that spontaneously? Yeah. Right, so we're doing soils. So I'm just laughing because you always tell me I ask you a lot of questions.
Oh,
so
well.
I'm the questioner.
So you'd be in this class and we're doing soils, and then you start asking more and more questions.
What are the main parts of soil?
Yes, well that's interesting. Who knows in this class what are the 3 classes of soils?
Do you want us to actually answer?
You can.
Silt, clay and sand.
Right,
What's
thank
silt?
you. What's silt? Has anyone got an idea what silt is, please?
It's the medium grain of 3.
Ah, lovely. That's a perfect answer. Thank you.
What else is in soil?
Well, let's think. What else can we find? No, I'd keep very serious. What else can we find in soil other than the particle matter? What else can we find? Yeah, organic matter. Perfect. That's one thing. It's happening. What is desirable? Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is you're not answering my questions. You're letting other people answer them.
That's valid.
Yeah, so it's reducing my desire to ask more questions as someone that wants your validation.
So they run down. You answer every question as courteously as well as you can. If possible, pass the question until they run down and say, is that the answer you're looking for? Is this what you're wanting? And check all the time, because you do want those questions answered, and you're not going to say that's enough questions. Stop, we don't want them. Oh, we've got massage corner here.
He's got issues.
Yeah. Okay, so I've had one student utterly defeat me. I couldn't manage them, and I personally had quite a pejorative term for them, which is an MDF, which is a major disturbance factor. Always late. Always lost the car keys. If you said don't bring animals, some reason they'd bring rats and let them go in a room on a visit somewhere. Their car would break down, they would spill the tea, there wasn't one thing that you ever got through without this person. And eventually you could see the class reacting, and I couldn't manage this person at all. I was at the end of my tether. I didn't know what to do. Just all this, they'd fall off the ball, right? They'd drop their books, they'd kick over the water bottle, right? They'd break the wine bottle on the carpet. It wouldn't matter what it was an MDF. And I recognise them quite quickly now, and I tend to hand them over to the class to manage. That's beyond my ability to stop that. And they got this person through their final piece of work because I couldn't do it. Everything would happen to their design that you could ever imagine. It wasn't the dog ate it, it was the cow. It was just one thing after another, and I could not manage. Well, the class got concerned, and they became sort of, I never ever said anything. I'd just say, oh, that's terrible. Phone call, can someone come and pick me up, please, because the car won't start. 10 kilometres away, wanting a pickup when you're halfway through a class to pull. I mean, it was just one of those really memorable things that happened.
The rest of their life was like that.
I beg pardon? Oh, yes, it was. Sideswipe cars. Yeah, ring people up at midnight and say, I'm sorry it's late, but I wanted to know if you can hear the dog barking. I mean, it just went on and on and on. There was no end to it, and it isn't my role. And then the class sort of picked up and said, okay, there's some of the main things that happen. There have been others where students are not quite taking responsibility for themselves. So the person who said, can we have the light switched off because these give me a headache? I'm able to say, can you manage that for yourself, please? Do you have a hat or a scarf, or sit somewhere else? Because I shouldn't have to manage a whole class sitting in the dark with candles because one person finds that they don't like the light. So there are situations like that where you can pass the responsibility back to the person. It happens a lot with temperature. I'm too hot, can we turn the air conditioning up? And someone else says, I'm too cold. So temperature's personal. You say, please put yourself where you're comfortable and don't have to rush around meeting those needs. Most of the others, the late comer, Gradually, you never stop and wait for the latecomer, you just keep going. The talker will gradually, by day 3, start to assume the culture of the group, and they work in. More troublesome than students are teachers, usually co-teachers or team teachers who don't know their work and don't teach to competencies. So I had one group and we were doing the food forest, or this teacher should have taught the food forest. And I said next day, okay, now let's see your design for your food forest, for your place. We didn't do that, we did meditation. And I thought, look, bugger that. Really, I mean, meditation's good, but we really need these students capable to design a food forest and understand a productive system before we can go on. They have to understand about getting the water and the soil and the nutrient, everything right. And it's not okay to sit down in the beautiful place and do a meditation for an hour. I've had other team teachers usually that start teaching something else. We were doing Zone 0. It's quite clear the content: sighting, orientation, rooms, solar, waste, grey water, water in, water out. It's quite clear how to teach it. Materials, whether you do natural building or retrofit, whether you're in the tropics and need big verandas, or you need high houses, or you're in temperate areas with big windows facing the sun. Quite simple. Took nearly the whole session getting groups to design a house for the tropics and a house for the temperate area and a house for somewhere else, and the rest of it was the house my grandma lived in. And that was really a terrible thing to do to the class. So if you're in any sort of team teaching, you must set up your competencies really clearly among yourselves, and your other teachers can trust you to teach to them. And the other thing is teachers who run over time when you're team teaching. And if you're being respectful, you try to finish on time. And the teacher who goes over and over, that's another teacher waiting. We don't want to cut the break because students need it. We're not going to ask them to cut the break because that's not fair. And they've gone 20, 30 minutes over. And I remember saying to this person, please stop. And he said, this is important. And he was talking. You know, it was time to stop. There was no self-discipline in the teacher. It was a very unpleasant experience. We got to the end of the course and the students hadn't had a fair, good course of appropriate stuff that would make them good permaculturalists. So, you know, that is, and a student teacher who didn't know their boundaries and kept going into the kitchen to tell the cooks what to do. I mean, that's just not what a teacher does. So there are all sorts of issues around co-teachers and team teaching that's really important and can be quite difficult.
Can I add something to that? When you're team teaching, are people familiar with team teaching versus co-teaching? Because I don't think we've defined that. What we've been modelling is co-teaching, where there's 2 or more facilitators teaching one session. And team teaching would be if Brenna taught her sessions, neither of us were there, then we came in, then we taught Ro taught her session, and then I came in the next day and I taught that whole next day, and none of us know what each other are teaching. No. And so there's no one actually monitoring learning or the learning journey in order to make sure those competencies are covered. So that's team teaching, and then co-teaching is that. And I wanted to bring up the example that happened earlier today, where you gave a suggestion and said, can I offer a suggestion as to how you would run that activity? And because of trust and respect, I was very open to hearing Brenna's suggestion. But that there's been other co-teachers in the past where you would not say, what would you like to say? Because that person then talks for 40 minutes. And you lose your class and you lose your session. And so co-teaching is, a skill as well, a healthy skill to work at.
It's having a co-teaching team that you trust really adds to your teaching experience. To feel that someone's got your back. If there is an issue with a student, there's somebody else there. If there's you know, someone wandering around outside that's not part of the group looking lost, and you think, oh, they need to see someone co-teachers onto it, just adds so much to the stability of the group. And like what happened today, I wasn't part of the teaching of that session, but I was still present, and in that sense still co-teaching, still invested in the outcome and the content of that session, and able to debrief about it afterwards with that knowledge. That's why we sit in on each other's sessions for the whole course.
Do you share the load as far as creating the actual, well, obviously the class plan, sort of, like the content, like, so you brainstorm the content together about who's going to teach what?
Yeah, so in this course, Rose created the course content, and there's a book about it. And then we've done the course, worked with Ro to learn how to teach the course and then practice, but also we come with our own ways of doing things. But in a PDC, like the one I just ran with Good Life Permaculture, we sit down at each evening, and I'd never taught with Nick Tao before, I'd never taught with Nadia Dante before, and they were my team. And we sit down and say, okay, tomorrow, how are you doing it? What are you doing? How can I help? What do you need? Is there a gap? And, you know, we had feedback, okay, bit of stagnation, people are tired after lunch. How do we work through that together? And we actually thought up some great new activities that none of us had ever done, just as a group, by taking in that feedback of the class and by sitting in on what each other were doing.
You know, another challenge can be the expert. The expert on water who comes in and talks about how to chemicalise water, and you think you're going to hear something about water recycling or renewal, and you say, can you teach that and check it out? And they come in and they do something quite opposite. So really that business about the expert coming in can be a big disappointment. So it's better if the expert's actually a permaculturist as well and comes from a design viewpoint.
Confuse the students as well, I suppose.
Yes, they wonder why they're getting this lecture on the chemicalising of water, for example, or whatever it is. Yeah. With the comedian all the time sitting in the back, you can always say, can we all hear the joke, please? Or can we, and you say that 2 or 3 times and often stops. The people who talk constantly, you can just stop every time they speak, because I will not speak over people. So if you started a whole conversation over there, I'm not at all angry, alarmed or affected. I just wait, because I'm not going to talk over you. And after a while, people learn that if they start talking, then the teacher stops to give you time, because it can be very important. I'm not saying you're talking because it's not important, just that I don't talk over you. And if it's important, you need to say it and finish it, and I don't mind. I'm really getting to sort of really relaxed behaviour and just wait. It's all right to talk. Yeah. It's the extreme people that can be quite difficult. Another one we had just lay spread-eagled on the floor for the first day, and we took absolutely no notice. And it turned out that we'd learnt that he'd just come back from Afghanistan and fighting in Afghanistan and wasn't in a good state. But after a day of lying on the floor, he got up and sat down like everyone else, and that was fine. So don't put oxygen on the flame. Just let it die. But always check the people are all right. So, Sahib, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay, good. Okay, they're okay. Fine. Let the behaviour go on as long as people can do it, really.
I have a question, not specifically about any personality here, but if you've got someone who is inflammatory sort of character that tends to clash with other people, and if there is a personality clash that arises particularly between two, ideally you leave 2 adults to sort it out between themselves and it's fine. What about when it gets to the point where both of them are, I don't want to be around that person, I don't want to be around that person, one of us has to leave. How would you manage that, and where to intervene and how much, so it doesn't get to a point that somebody's leaving, or
It has happened, hasn't happened in my courses. It sometimes happens around the PDC design, where someone wants the windmill here and nowhere else, and they storm out. If they're really angry, I find them and say, would you please walk around the building 3 times and then come back and tell me what's happening? Because that really big walk is just a very good time for them to cool down. Don't try to talk to people who are angry or upset. Just wait till it subsides. You probably did that this morning in NVC. Don't even take on someone who's yelling at you. Stand back and say, I'm listening, and you just watch it all subside. Now, that person, some people can upset a whole class, and we can bring out the class code again and say, are we listening? Are we being sarcastic? Are we talking over people as a class issue? The other thing you can do is put them in small groups, varying small groups all the time with others, and people will still get fed up. But gradually you say, are you listening to each other? Are you on task? That's your monitoring mantra. Are you listening to each other? Are you on task? After a little while, they'll bring their behaviour into the class behaviour. People can't sustain it too long against a culture that's not there. And then sometimes we'd say, we're permaculturists, we're people going for peace. We want a peaceful, green and equal world. That's what we're about. So can we just try for that a bit harder to the class?
I think people can learn how to self-regulate if you don't feed the... If you're not reacting, then no one else is reacting. And then that person learns that there's no reaction coming from the behaviour.
No response to some of those behaviours is the best, and expect them. One woman came up to me, and she was very difficult in the first session. She came up and said, well, don't let me be the student from hell. And I said, there's no such thing. I said, there's no such thing. You'll be absolutely fine in this group. You're absolutely acceptable and you're right the way you are. Nothing ever happened after that. She flipped after possibly years of behaviour of challenging. It's about 8 minutes and we're going to finish on time. Were you asking something or commenting, Shani?
Yeah, just a comment. You mentioned earlier about the code of conduct. I've always found it really handy to have that to refer back to. And you sometimes have those wonderful experiences where you don't have to do anything because the class...
That's right.
Nothing. I was on Zoom, did a Zoom composting workshop once, and there was one guy who refused to put his picture on. And so I wasn't, I thought I'm going to talk to him later about, being able to join him properly. And I'm talking, and I don't even know what I said, but there was this loud voice that said, "That is complete and utter bullshit!" Right? And luckily, I didn't know what to do. And then there was a silence, and then he said, "Was my audio on?" And then everyone went, but what happened afterwards was magic, because I didn't say a word because I was flabbergasted and didn't know what to say. But someone said, remember the code of conduct we had? Even if your audio wasn't on, that's not treating someone with respect. And then someone else said, I feel unsafe. And they ended up, without me doing anything, they ended up having this discussion with him about whether, because the next one was going to be face-to-face, and how people felt about having him there face-to-face. And I just sat there, like I wanted to turn my video off. Oh my God. But it's beautiful. And a good lesson sometimes in just what the group will do. And then the other thing I wanted to say is a group will hold a tricky person if they don't have to have them all the time. So I'm a really big believer in random groups. So I actually don't say go and find 5 people you haven't worked with or whatever, but I always have some sort of random way of doing it so that they don't have to have it all the time. Because they fear going into a group, but they're willing to hold the person.
Yes, that's very good. Remember the 3 A's. Avoid means just don't respond to any bad behaviour as much as you can, or difficult or challenging behaviour. Remember the woman from Brazil in the last course? She knew everything and interrupted everything all the time. And I would confirm whenever she was right and appropriate. I'd say, thank you, that's a really good comment. And for the rest of the comments, I took no notice. The class started to take no notice. She became quieter. And it was simply confirming what was accurate and right in her responses at a time that was right.
Yeah.
Right, I just wanted to add that sometimes if I can see if one person has too much energy, I'll just give them a task that maybe has some movement, like ask them to fetch something or be responsible for something, and sometimes then they feel important and included.
Yeah, I was thinking of the student that's always forgetting, who would be awesome to write on the board, who wants something to do, they're a tactile learner, that's why they need to be moving while they're perceiving information. And so if they're writing in the middle of the class, it's a great use of their energy.
Do you remember the teacher training before Christmas?
Yep.
And Julian? He was very, very nervous, and I said, can I give you a pencil and paper and you can draw while you're listening? And that was a great help. And he did, and then he sat out of the circle. I said, if I give you a pencil and paper and you draw, are you happy to join the circle? Yes. Pencil and paper and draw and join. We're making things possible for people. We're making a good experience. We're not trying to be authoritative or change people or even be any sort of therapist. So it's 8 o'clock. Are there some more comments from anyone?
Just on modelling wax. Modelling wax is awesome with kids.
What's that?
Modelling wax, when they're listening to something for a long period of time, something for them to play with their hands.
Yeah.
They completely listen, but they're playing with it.
And colouring in, I found for adults as well, works really well, particularly when you're talking about difficult subjects. People can still engage a lot better if they're concentrating on their drawing.
In Scandinavia, men and women knit and crochet. So they'll bring a little something if they're a bit fidgety. But as you model it, so it will be. There was a comment that Brenna made tonight about this group, Brenna. Would you like to repeat it so they can take it home to bed? About the work and the groups and the way they will work. I'm reminding you, not trying to put words in your mouth, but you probably wonder what it was. But it was about the groups and how they were working, especially on the major task.
That there's always a risk in groups that have people who have strong ideas about things, or several people with a lot of experience in an area, or people with a lot of confidence, that in a group there could be clashes, tension. And I was reflecting to Ro how in my observations of the group work project this afternoon and yesterday afternoon, the way that groups have really come together, large groups, and figured out a process that's harmonious and fair so that everyone can speak and be heard was really exceptional. Yeah.
That's like a progress report for you. That this is really, and the other thing happened at dinner. It is highly desirable when the facilitators or teachers running the course and they come into the room, everyone's so involved they don't notice them. And you get to a point, you're getting to be collegiate at that point, with knowledge and input and responsibility and understanding. So no one said, please clear the tables, and no one said at 7 o'clock. It all started to happen. That's one of the best stages for you in a course, when people are sort of self-running and self-managing and self-timing and getting there. And it's actually quite difficult to achieve, and I just wonder whether it's ice cream.
Crumble.
Or the crumble. Or the promise of ice cream, something like that. But there's some magic happening about this group which is extremely lovely and gracious, really. So unless there's anything urgent, you can talk to me.
Sheepdog announcement.
Beg pardon?
Sheepdog announcement. There's going to be drumming here at 10 minutes to 8. And anyone can come and join in if they want.
Running?
Drumming.
Oh.
Tiny little bit. And then it's going to transition into the circle space to do a little bit of body percussion, principles body percussion. That'll all happen before the gathering time. It'll be finished.
Oh, that's good.
The gathering time. So if you want to get there early, for a bit of that. And then we'll do a quick little 30-second drum when you've got 1 minute to get there.
Is this tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow morning.
Oh, I thought he meant 8 o'clock tonight. I thought first of all we're going out running and then we're going to go drumming at 8 o'clock. Everyone's aching to get back to their teaching for tomorrow, aren't you? Okay, sweet dreams, deep rest. Have a lovely evening. Thank you, everyone.